there should be no doubt that Assad is, in fact, the one responsible for the horrific humanitarian crisis, the violence, the killing in Syria. And I think those who still say it's the opposition, they're looking for an excuse to be a non-actor and a person who is enabling Assad to continue with these atrocities, like the use of chemical weapons and barrel bombs against innocent civilians. I see no urgency, however, from the Obama administration aimed at pressuring Assad to go. We could be destroying and neutralizing Assad's air capabilities, sanctioning Assad, his military officials, or any other entity, including the Russians and the Iranians, that are supporting him. And we could be focusing our efforts here in Congress to passing a substantive authorization of the use of military force in AUMF that not only authorizes military force against ISIL, but also against Assad, al-Nusra, and any other terrorist entity operating in Syria. Our train and equip program in Syria may not be enough. According to the latest reports, only 2,000 fighters have been identified, 400 have been vetted, only 90 have begun training. And DoD says that the program is not aimed at attacking Assad. We've got to change our strategy in Syria, because attempting to degrade and defeat ISIL while forcing the very ones whom we are training and equipping to promise, they have to promise to not attack Assad, makes little, if any, sense. In the meantime, the Assad regime has been responsible for 30 chlorine bomb attacks from March to June, just in that time span, while the first chemical weapons attacks in Syria were reportedly with sarin gas. Subsequent attacks, as we know, have all been with chlorine. So I wanted to ask the panelists, first, is there any evidence of other chemical weapons being used in Syria today other than chlorine? And also, in his latest book, former Israeli Ambassador Michael Oren has said that the Russian plan to remove chemical weapons from Syria originated with an Israeli minister. Ambassador Ford, I wanted to know how you would characterize the Obama administration's handling of the whole situation, from the red line, if you cross it, we're not going to forget about that, we're going to take action, and then nothing happens, to the plan to remove chemical weapons. And what role might Israel have played in all of this? And lastly, it's well known that Russia continues to prop up the Assad regime. What leverage do we have in the U.S. over Russia to persuade it to change its calculus on Assad and assist in removing him from power? And what about the other countries in the region? What could they do as well? Ambassador?
Thank you, Congresswoman. With respect to Ambassador Oren's comments about the Israeli role, from where I sat inside the State Department in the autumn of 2013, I did not see a visible Israeli role, and so I just can't comment on what he wrote in his book. It wasn't visible to us at the upper working level, shall I say. With respect to what happened in 2013, in retrospect, obviously, laying out a red line and then not enforcing it has hurt our credibility not only inside Syria, but it certainly hasn't acted to deter Assad, and it's probably hurt us regionally and internationally. It's just a matter of record. I would also add that I came up to this committee with Secretary Kerry, and it was a hard sell here on Capitol Hill at the time, Congresswoman. So
some of us were there trying to help out, but the team sort of left the field.
It's not to excuse policy decisions. It is simply to say that the policy decisions are hard. I think going forward, as I said in my opening statement, it's really important to figure out how to deter Assad. I don't think that he can be deterred without some kind of indirect or direct military action. The totality of my Syrian contacts for years have described the regime as really paying attention only to military, whether it be American or other, to military actions. Thank you.
Just quickly comment on how you evaluate the training and equip program that we have going in Syria now.
I think you're referring to the one about that's using Department of Defense program monies. And I have two comments on it. Number one, the scale of it is not enough even to really affect the Islamic State, which deploys in Syria somewhere between 15, 20, 25,000 fighters. For us to inject 2, 3, 4, 5,000, I don't think is going to make a huge difference. And I'm not even talking about the logistical problems that force would have. But more broadly speaking, Congresswoman, I do not think we will be successful convincing many Syrian experienced and capable fighters to pledge only to fight the Islamic State and not to fight the Assad regime. I don't excuse the Syrians in that, but I think it's important for Americans to understand that the Assad regime is responsible for the deaths of maybe 150, 200,000 people in Syria. The Islamic State is horrible, it's brutal, it's awful. It's killed maybe 4,000 or 5,000 Syrians. So if you're sitting where a Syrian sits, the Assad regime's brutality is worse even than that of the Islamic State, as horrible as it is.
Ms.
Thank you,
Brad,
sir.